What's up, people of the internet? My name is Abacab, and currently in Artifact there are 3 items that cost 25 gold. Nyctasha's Guard, Apotheosis Blade, and Horn of the Alpha. Which of these 3 game-ending items is right for your deck? Let's find out in today's video. So at the moment we only know of 3 items that have the max, well, we assume max. We currently haven't seen any item that costs more than 25 gold, so we're just assuming that 25 is the item gold cap. These 3 items are very clearly designed to be game-ending, game-winning items, as in you get this item and you are 1, maybe 2 turns away from winning, because these are game-winning, player-destroying items, but each in their own unique way. So we're going to discuss each of these items and figure out which item is good at what, how they will help you win, and which deck each item would be best suited for, because you don't want to clutter your deck with super expensive items because you'll never be able to afford them all. So we got to figure out which items we really want in our deck. So first off, let's go with the big one, the one that everyone loves to talk about, Apotheosis Blade. This card is an absolute mouthful. It's got so much stuff going on. So first off, the equipped hero has +8 attack and +4 siege. Plus, anytime it attacks something, it condemns that hero creep, whatever it is, so it's gone from the board. Doesn't matter if they got 1,000 health, 1,000 armor, you smack them with the sword, and they're out of here. Secondly, it has an ability with a 1-turn cooldown, meaning you can use it every single round. Click that button, and you condemn all enemy improvements in your lane, plus you destroy all the items on 1 hero in that lane. So there's really a ton to go over with this item. So first off, let's talk about the passive features, the +8 attack damage, the +4 siege, and the condemn. So what it's meant to be is you put this sword on a hero and they're just smacking into the enemy lines and they are devastating. It doesn't matter what they've got going on. Either it's going to hit the tower and deal a ton of damage because you got +8 attack, a ton of damage to the tower, or it's going to get blocked by something. And if it does get blocked by something, it's still going to do 4 siege damage to the tower, so you can't just constantly chump block it. And whatever it is that it's blocking is getting taken out. Now let's go into the active ability. The active ability is meant to shut down all the progress that the enemy player has made. They spent all this time building up all these improvements, gone. They're out of here. They spent all this gold getting super valuable items, gone. They're out of here. So the weird thing about this ability is, in some ways, potentially it could do nothing, right? If there are no improvements, then your ability can't destroy anything. If there are no items on a hero, which doesn't seem that likely, but I guess the better way to phrase that is, if there are no heroes in the lane with items to destroy, then the ability does nothing. So the active ability seems super powerful, and it is, don't get me wrong, but I think there's going to be some times, definitely, when if you play this blade, if you run this item in your deck and you put it on a hero, you're just not going to have anything to destroy with that clicky. So you got to keep that in mind. So now let's talk about what the card is good at, what it wants to be paired with. Right off the bat, anything that involves attacking is really good with red heroes. For example, Duel, Berserker's Call, anything that redirects damage like New Orders. These cards are going to make the most out of Apotheosis Blade because you can ensure that you get those passive effects triggered. So if you can speed things along to the combat phase with things like enough magic, or if you can create mini combats with Duel and Berserker's Call, then the item will be so much more effective. Honestly, I feel like a lot of this card's potential is going to rest on how the meta develops, because its active ability depends entirely on what the other player does or doesn't do. So I feel like the popularity of this card will rise and fall depending on how popular improvements are in the meta. So for example, let's suppose that one of the top decks in the meta is Sorlakan, and it's all about playing Sorlakan in a lane, putting out tons and tons of assault ladders, and then pushing 1 tower and then the ancient for victory. In that case, I think Apotheosis Blade is probably going to be more popular than normal because people are going to rely on that improvement destroying effect to wipe out assault towers or whatever improvement is popular. Like, Mists of Avernus, maybe Mists of Avernus is super popular in the meta. In that case, I would expect to see more Apotheosis Blades than normal. The same thing kind of goes for econ ramp decks. If we see a bunch of decks that are all about generating tons and tons of gold, and buying just massive amounts of really powerful items, we might also see an increase in Apotheosis Blade because players are going to rely on Apotheosis Blade to take out those completely stacked heroes who have, you know, Horn of the Alpha and all these million different items that are allowing them to run away with the game. So I kind of feel like Apotheosis Blade, while it's very strong and while it is very useful, might be one of the most meta-sensitive cards that are currently available because it's all about, you know, reacting to what the opponent does. Now, let's talk about countering this card. This card has one very pronounced weakness, and that is you have to actually attack with it in order to get the effect. So if Crystal Maiden, that tiny little 2/5 ice wizard, is like frostbolt and disarms you, then sorry to say, man, but you're not attacking. You don't get the benefit from that +8 attack, +4 siege, condemns heroes that it damages, because you're not attacking at all. Earthshaker, if he pops down right in front of you, Fisher, boom, suddenly you're stunned, you can't do anything. So Apotheosis Blade is very, very vulnerable to any sort of disabling effect that prevents damage. And one important thing is that the condemn effect, when you hit someone with the sword, only triggers if you actually deal damage. Meaning, if you can prevent that damage, either by blocking or by damage immunity, then it doesn't get condemned. So if you've got a Bristleback who somehow has 50 armor, and he gets hit with Apotheosis Blade, that Bristleback will not be condemned because he hasn't taken any damage. Also, damage immunity from cards like Divine Purpose or Hand of God are incredible counters to Apotheosis Blade. You could actually put a measly 2/4 creep in front of a hero with Apotheosis Blade, put Divine Purpose on that creep to give him permanent damage immunity, and that creep will tank that Apotheosis Blade forever. Of course, the 4 siege damage will keep coming through, so I guess you are kind of on a clock. It's not really forever, but just it will definitely slow down that hero significantly because that sword won't be able to condemn that creep. So Apotheosis Blade really has a lot going on for it. It's really strong. It has a ton of effects, but I feel like players are going to be tempted to go for the Apotheosis Blade because they're just sort of viscerally attracted to, it's the most expensive weapon in the game. It's a flaming sword. It has all this text. Oh, it's got to be the strongest one. But I'm actually not sure that just for a generically useful all-around item, I just don't know if it's the best option. We'll get to the other items in a second, but I just feel like if you don't know which item to pick, I don't know if Apotheosis Blade is the best route. One other final thing that I want to go over is Apotheosis Blade does not have the best synergy with Pugna, because Pugna's ability is all about destroying improvements, and Apotheosis Blade also has an ability that destroys improvements. So if you have Pugna and Apotheosis Blade in the same deck, it's a little bit redundant, you know? All right, next up is Horn of the Alpha. So the passive effect on Horn of the Alpha is pathetic. +4 health. That's actually the exact same effect as the cheapest accessory in the game, Traveler's Cloak, which also gives +4 health. But the big difference between the Traveler's Cloak at 3 gold and the Horn of the Alpha at 25 gold is the active effect. Every 2 turns you can summon a Thunderhide pack, which is a massive 14/14 with 6 siege. So when you get a Horn of the Alpha, that's when the stampede starts. You're going to keep putting out Thunderhide Alphas every 2 turns and just smacking into a tower and making your lane wider and wider and wider with these nigh unkillable beasts. And these Thunderhide Alphas are kind of going to do the same thing as the Apotheosis Blade. Either it's going to go straight into the tower and deal 14 damage, a massive amount of damage to the tower, or they're going to put something in front of it to block it, but it's still going to do 6 siege damage, which is more than Apotheosis Blade, actually. So in that sense, I would say that this card has probably the highest damage potential. The big thing, I'd say probably the biggest thing about the Horn of the Alpha is that it's just going to keep happening turn after turn after turn, and the lane's going to keep getting bigger until eventually the enemy player just can't deal with it entirely. So of all the 25 gold items, this is by far the most snowbally. It is insanely snowbally. It essentially puts your opponent on a clock. They have to win the game in the next couple of turns, otherwise the Thunderhides are just going to completely run away with the map, completely destroy the lane. The Horn of the Alpha has one advantage over the Apotheosis Blade, which is the hero that you put it on doesn't have to get to the combat phase to be effective. So really all you have to do to get your mileage out of the item is to hit that clicky button. So let's say, for example, the lane comes to your hero has Horn of the Alpha, and you click that button. A Thunderhide Alpha spawns. then the enemy hero kills your hero. At that point, it really doesn't matter that your hero is dead because your hero has done what he came to do, which is summon the Thunderhide Alpha. Then the hero's going to be gone for a turn. Doesn't matter because the ability is still on cooldown. The next turn, the hero comes back, coincidentally at the exact same turn as the cooldown comes off, and he can pop him in the lane, hit that click again, and summon another Thunderhide. So essentially, this is one of the few 25 gold items that can be completely uncounterable. As long as you always have initiative, when it gets to your lane, then the enemy hero just can't stop you. But, you know, we don't have to worry about things like disarm, you know? So just in general, it's a bit more reliable, it's a bit harder to counter. And it's true that you can kind of counter the Thunderhide Alpha. You can put cheap creep in front of them, or you know, maybe cast Dimensional Portal to create a wall in front of the Thunderhides. But even then, they're doing 6 damage, and a tower can only take but so many 6 damage siege hits before it's just gonna crumble. So in my opinion, Horn of the Alpha is probably the most like generically useful across the board good 25 cost card that we've seen. It's a bit slow though, like that's the one problem. Because it's got a 2-turn cooldown, that means that if you're playing against a really aggressive deck, you might just play Horn of the Alpha and there's like, okay, time to, you know, blow my wombo combo and push to win, and they just won't care about the Thunderhide Alpha. Because fundamentally, when you play it, the turn you play it, all you're getting is a Thunderhide Alpha. And the value comes from 2, 4, 6 turns down the road when you've got a massive amount of Thunderhide Alphas and you run away with the game. The trick is getting there. So for that reason, I would say Horn of the Alpha is probably a little bit better suited towards slower decks that are good at stalling the game out, controlling, preventing damage, because you want the game to go on as long as possible. So the longer the game goes on, the better Horn of the Alpha becomes 100%. The other nice thing about this card is it has both defensive and offensive applications. Apotheosis Blade is basically all offense. It's about dealing damage, destroying things, and just like lobbing damage straight at the tower. But it's not nearly as defensive as putting out a Thunderhide Alpha to block hits for you. Because the thing to know about the Thunderhide Alphas is that when they spawn, they will always spawn in front of an enemy if possible. It's actually one of the most important rules of Artifact, is that when you play any card in a lane, it has to go in front of an enemy if there is an empty enemy slot. If there isn't, then they can go, you know, to either side of the lane. So that means Thunderhide Alphas, if you've got some massive hero that's bearing down on your tower, you know, Sorla Khan's about to hit your tower for 12 or whatever, you can click that button, Thunderhide Alpha will spawn in front of one of the targets, and not only will it soak that damage for you and probably survive because it's got so much health, but then when you get to the combat phase, it's going to be dealing damage in one way or the other, either with 14 pure damage or with 6 siege damage to the enemy tower. So for that reason, I really like this card. I'd say it's probably the best all-around useful. I would recommend this card for beginners. I'd be most inclined to recommend this card for just any deck. It just has so many applications. The only thing I really wouldn't suggest it for would be a really fast, aggressive deck. Because if you're trying to just win the game as quickly as possible, then Thunderhide Alpha is kind of counterintuitive to that. It just takes too long to come online and really be useful, so you might be better suited going for maybe the next item that we'll talk about. Speaking of the last 25 gold card, we have Nyctasha's Guard. This card has probably the wimpiest passive effect you could possibly imagine. +1 block. Whoop-de-doo. It's okay. I mean, it's better than nothing. It's basically the armor equivalent of Horn of the Alpha. Horn of the Alpha has the same bonus as the cheapest health item, and the same thing with Nyctasha's Guard. It has the same bonus as the cheapest block producing item. So just like Horn of the Alpha, all the value comes from the passive. The passive is a 1 ability cooldown, meaning you can use it every single round. And when you use it, it teleports all enemy neighbors, so the person in front of you, to the corner left and to the corner right of you, to another lane. So this card's kind of hard to analyze because it does this weird sort of thing where it's like trying to figure out if it's offensive or defensive. And on the one hand, it's defensive because when you teleport the things in front of you to another lane, those things aren't going to be dealing damage to you in combat, so that keeps you safe. But like at the same time, the item gives you block, which makes you better at surviving combat damage. So it seems kind of counterintuitive to send them to another lane. It's like, on paper, it looks like, you would put this on a hero just to keep your hero alive, to keep him safe. It gives you block, it keeps them from taking combat damage potentially. I mean, something else could be coming in after it, of course. But I think that's not really the real idea behind Nyctasha's card. I think it's actually an offensive item. What you do is you put this on a hero, you empty the 3 lanes, the 3 card slots in front of them, and that opens up 3 attack lanes for you and whichever your 2 allies are beside you. It's honestly more offensive and aggressive. It's kind of actually a game-ending card. I actually think this is by far the most aggressive card because Horn of the Alpha and Apotheosis Blade take a little bit of time to come online. If you put Apotheosis Blade on someone, then what they're probably going to do is just absolutely destroy whatever's in front of them, which is great. But that's just what they're going to do. They're just going to destroy that target. Same thing with Horn of the Alpha. When you play Horn of the Alpha, it's probably not going to win you the game that turn. It's more than likely going to summon one thing, which is either going to smack into a tower for a lot of damage, or it's going to come in front of a creep or whatever, wherever there's an empty slot, and just start building up your board. Nyctasha's guard is different. So if you're in like this really tense lane, you and the opponent have both built up your resources, you got a bunch of heroes here, a bunch of creep, and you slap down Nyctasha's guard on someone. You hit that ability. Suddenly, the 3 targets that they have, that the enemy is relying on both protecting themselves from damage and on winning the tower, are teleported to a random lane. Their plans are completely screwed up. And you've created a massive attack lane where you could potentially just win the game right there. I mean, if it's like 10 health tower, 10 health tower, and you're both struggling to get an edge, Nyctasha's guard absolutely gives you that edge. Apoth Blade and Horn of the Alpha, they're going to take a little bit before they start giving you that edge. You know, they're going to have to get some kills before that happens. Nyctasha's guard, man, you don't have to wait. Put that on Sorla Khan, teleport those targets out of the way, and Sorla Khan is smacking that tower for some massive damage. So for that reason, bizarrely, the shield, the defensive item of the 3 items, is actually the most aggressive and the most defensive. So one of the really cool things about this item, which plays into its whole like offensive nature, is that it can really screw up the enemy's plans. Let's suppose, for example, that you're in lane 1 and your opponent has a red hero and a blue hero in lane 1 against you. You put Nyctasha's guard on your hero and you click that button because you have initiative, and those heroes get teleported to other lanes. In that case, you effectively silence that lane, because if you can teleport heroes out of that lane, that means the enemy is not going to be able to leverage the mana in that lane. So with one click, you can potentially take out 3 heroes from a lane. And the craziest thing about this card is it's like unstoppable. How do you deal with this card? As long as you are really proactive about gaining initiative, what does someone do about it, man? Next turn comes around, they put a hero in this lane, click, teleport, goodbye. That means they're not attacking the person with Nyctasha's guard. That means they're not casting spells. It means they're not doing anything. You just click, gone, click, gone, click, gone. So if you put this on a really aggressive, high damage hero like Axe or Bristleback or Sorla Khan, and just every turn remove the enemy hero from the lane, you're going to absolutely destroy the enemy tower. So it's just insanely aggressive. It's essentially a game-winning card. Like, you put this on a hero, and you'll probably win the game that turn, because a lot of towers that late in the game can't survive more than 1 or 2 hero hits before they're down. The risky thing about this card, though, is that you could potentially screw yourself over. You're the one in control, so to speak, because you get to, press the button, decide when and how things move, but they get teleported to random lanes. So there's a possibility that you're kind of evenly matched in lane 1, and then you're evenly matched in lane 2, and you play this card in lane 1 and teleport your heroes, and they all go to lane 2, and suddenly you're completely overwhelmed in lane 2, and they smack into your tower ancient and win. So the randomness is going to create some kind of awkward situations, but in general, I would say that the benefits of using this card far outweigh the disadvantages, especially if you're running an aggressive deck. It feels so weird to say put the shield in an aggressive deck because it seems counterintuitive, but I really do feel like this is the most aggressive, hard-hitting 25 cost card in the game that we know of anyways. So overall, I would say Apotheosis Blade is best for decks that are really good at getting to combat and creating, mini combats from things like Duel. Plus, it's kind of meta sensitive. Horn of the Alpha is really good for slow decks and probably the most overall, generally useful item card in my opinion. I think Nyctasha's guard is really good for aggressive, high damage heroes, high damage decks that want to just plow through to the tower, plow through to the ancient, and secure a victory. So if you're kind of struggling to decide which card to put in your deck, personally I would recommend Horn of the Alpha. It's a bit slow, but it feels the most all-around useful to me, and probably the easiest to use, sort of like the lowest skill floor. It's kind of hard to mess up. You know, you just click it every turn you can. It spawns a big thing. The big thing hits the tower. It's pretty straightforward. So for beginners, start with Horn of the Alpha and then branch out into Apotheosis Blade and Nyctasha's Guard once you learn more about the game and once you create more finely tuned decks. Anyways, let me know what you think. Do you agree or disagree with my analysis? Let me know down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Dabacab out.